What series of events resulted in spending 1 week in a Havana prison? The following story comes from Captain Adele, who has spent summers working as a tender captain in Monroe Harbor, Chicago, with her dog Buddy. Hi, I'm Sailor Eric, and one of the great pleasures in being part of the sailing community is the stories you hear from fellow sailors. Many of these stories provide valuable insights into what we might seek or what we might avoid. Adele is an accomplished captain with a diverse sailing history. Her sailing resume includes captaining a tall ship in the Great Lakes and sailing her 22-foot Westerly from Jacksonville, Florida to the U.S. Virgin Islands. She agreed to share the following captivating story, which involves the loss of her vessel.
It was a series of misadventures, but I'd been cruising in it for, 10 years or so. And
Yeah.
I've always been able to get myself out of every pickle I got into.
Yeah.
And my luck seemed to be running thin.
Okay.
So I was sailing back from the Virgin Islands to the U.S., but I had Buddy with me at this point.
Yep.
So I wanted to stop every night somewhere and take him to land. I was making a very slow trip of it.
Yep.
And so I arranged to have visas for every country except for any of the British islands because they have too many laws about dogs.
Yeah.
And so I ended up in Cuba and got hit by a major thunderstorm. I don't know what you call those little cells that just rev up to, they're not tornadoes, it wasn't that bad, but it was like really severe.
Yeah.
And I was at anchor and it ripped me off the anchor. And with the current where I was, I ended up on top of another shipwreck. It was the kind of thing where, okay, this is where the winds and currents wash people.
Yep.
And it washed me right there, and I got on top of it.
Your anchor dragged and your boat ended up on top of a wreck. You called for assistance. Somebody drug you off, ultimately got drug off the wreck, and you were able to patch a hole in the hull and make it and limp it to the next place that you went to, which was where?
And I had to lash the tiller together with line.
Wow.
So I had photos of that, the tiller's this long and here it's broken.
Yeah.
And just lashed together and it held.
Yeah. How big was that boat?
That was a 22-footer.
That was a 22-footer. Wow.
So I made it the 30 miles or something to the next port.
You're sailing in the Caribbean on a 22-foot boat?
I was sailing in the Atlantic on that boat.
All right, so you patch. What did you patch that hull with? Did you have a bung type of thing, or some sort of like exterior piece of cloth?
I had a little bit of fiberglass cloth and some epoxy.
Yep.
And used that.
Did you repair it wet? You would have had to, right?
Well, I repaired it while I was still sitting on the wreck.
Yeah.
My keel was sitting on the deck of the boat.
Oh, wow.
And my bow was in this notch. And once the water from the storm had gone away, at low tide, it was below the hole in my boat.
Oh, so the tide came down and you were able to...
And I was able to climb out of my boat, stand on the deck of the other one. It was covered with all kinds of... When I woke up in the morning and got out of my bunk, my feet were in the water, and that was very disturbing. And I couldn't find where the water was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
Till the tide came in.
Yeah.
And then I found the hole.
Uh-huh.
And the hole was about as big as my thumb.
Okay.
It was as if a piece of rebar had stuck right through the hull.
Yep.
I climbed out of the boat at low tide. I had some alcohol pads from the first aid kit.
Yep.
Used those to clean around it.
Yep.
Sanded it, cleaned it with those.
You just put some fiberglass over it.
And put fiberglass, epoxy.
Yeah.
Couple layers.
Yeah.
And it had till the next high tide to set.
Sure. Yep.
And it held for the rest of the time I owned the boat. I never did do anything more to it.
Wow.
So I left for the rest of the summer and came up here.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had the couple of really major hurricanes down there that wiped out St. Thomas.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had my problems right by a hurricane hole in Cuba. Mm-hmm. So my boat was safely in this little dock in Cuba and just fine. I came back to it, decided that it was good to go. I had gotten a spare tiller and took off. Okay. After that, I had some marvelous sailing down the coast of Cuba, stopped every night, talked to people. People were so hospitable and fed me. I had lobster stew with some fishermen on an uninhabited island that I was anchored at. I mean, just all the dream, just the dream. All my navigation equipment went out at once. I was just exhausted. And then the vent over the sink fell out into the sink because of sun damage from years. And so it was just like, it felt like everything was falling apart.
Yeah.
And then when I finally got to this Isle of the Children in Cuba, which is a tourist place, it's lots of tourists there. But I didn't see any of that. I just was, I navigated through a lot of complex little reef channels. And into this little bay, and there was an anchorage there, and anchored for the night, and went down to make supper, and suddenly realized that the wind shifted really quickly, and the anchor let go, and I was dragging anchor very quickly towards the reef. Couldn't get the engine to start, even though it was new. Couldn't get the sails up in time, and besides that, I was dragging the anchor, so I couldn't steer. And everything just went all bad at once. I ended up on the reef. And so I knew that the pounding waves were going to stave in the hull and called for help. And they came. And this is the funniest part. It turned into quite this little adventure and story when it didn't have to. But because I was on this reef, the weather was reasonably warm, a little chilly at night. Water was warm. The Cuban Coast Guard came to pick me up. But they couldn't get to where I was because of the reef. They didn't have a dinghy. So they told me I'd have to swim to their boat. Fine, I had my go bag, and I had Buddy with me. And I put a PFD on Buddy, which he didn't like because he's not used to them. And lowered myself into the water, and he wouldn't jump in, and I thoughtlessly let go of the line around my go bag to grab Buddy. The go bag floated across the reef in the wind into the darkness and was never seen again. So then I had no passport, no money, no phone, no nothing. So it was just me in a swimsuit, and Buddy got taken into shore. And they put me up at a B&B where a nice Canadian tourist in the morning said I looked shooken up and gave me a tall glass of Cuban rum and a big Cuban stogie. And it made life so much better. I'm sitting there, and I drank it, and I'm smoking this cigar, which I don't smoke. But really, it was so calming, all of this. And some lady had found me some clothes to wear, which were not my style at all, but whatever.
Yeah.
I had clothes on. And so the Cubans come and take me, and I ended up signing all this paperwork. I was afraid that I would be charged money for pollution or hitting the reef or something.
Right. Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And
right, you're liable for this amount of money to take the thing off and deal with the environment and all that stuff.
Yeah, if it had happened in Florida, I would have been up a creek.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh God, you know. And I said, boat's yours. It's all yours. There's a nice new generator on there. Be sure and save it, because the deck was still out of the water.
Yeah.
It was flooded. And you know, there's some valuables, they're all yours. I said, I signed all these papers. So they put me on a plane to Havana, and I had no choice. Yeah. Turns out I was an illegal.
Right.
You know, I got no papers.
Yeah.
So I go to jail. So they're taking me to jail.
They take you to Havana, where they then send you to jail?
They put me in their immigration jail. There were probably about a dozen people working there. I think there might have been some real jail cells down one corridor somewhere.
Yeah.
They stuck me and Buddy, because I wouldn't let go of Buddy. Yeah. They said, well, we have to take the dog. No, you can't take the dog. If you do, you'll have a crazy lady on your hands. I just threatened to just go bananas hysterical if they took him. Yeah. So they're like, look at me, you know, side-eyed, and okay, dog stays with you.
Nice.
And it helps to be an old lady sometimes.
Yeah, right.
So they put me up in what was housing for people that worked there. Yeah. But there was nobody else living in it at the time. So it was a nice little room with a couple of cots and a little kitchenette and a bathroom. Okay. And they brought me food every day, and didn't lock the door so I could take Buddy out to walk on a little piece of grass. Yeah. But it was all surrounded with a wall and fencing and wire. Yeah. So I knew I couldn't go anywhere. And since I didn't have the phone numbers of anyone in the States, I said, I don't have any phone numbers, and there's no way I can contact anyone. Yeah. You're completely isolated. You're completely out in Cuba, you know, with no resources. Yeah. So I just waited for them to figure out how to contact the U.S. government. Yeah. And of course, we had no embassy there at the time. Right. And so they said, well, we'll have to maybe try to, you know, call somebody in Mexico or something. Yeah. Meanwhile, eventually my kids are getting worried. Yeah. And they called their political people and had them calling around to find out what happened, because they knew that I'd been rescued in Cuba. They knew that much. Okay. Yeah. But they didn't know anything more. Right. You called them at some point on a cell phone? I called them on the cell phone while I was sitting waiting for the rescue boat. Got it. And said, I'm sitting here, I'm fine. Yep. We're not far from shore. If I have to, I can swim over there. So, but then in Havana, how many days before ultimately? A week. Wow. So I had nothing to read, nothing to write with. Yeah. But actually, it wasn't so bad. Yeah. You know, yeah, I mean, it sounds like they were treating you okay. They were treating me okay. Yeah, yeah. They just sort of didn't know what to do with me. Yeah. And they were so glad to get rid of me. You and that dog. Yeah. They won't let go of. And they just shoved me on the plane. Okay. Dog and all. We flew back to the States. Oh, nice. And my daughter met me at the airport in Chicago. Yeah. It was middle of winter. Yeah. And I'm in flip-flops. Yeah, right. And just whatever. Pink and black leopard print stretch pants. And a sequined T-shirt. And that was it. Those were the donation clothes that you had for the week? And you said, not my style. Yeah, all right. It was just hysterical. Yeah. And so she met me with a coat and boots.
Yeah. Adele has a number of remarkable stories around her single-handed sailing adventures from 2007 to 2018, as well as stories from sailing Great Lakes tall ships. If you would like to hear more stories from Adele, please leave a comment to let me know. Also, only 5% of you are actually subscribers. Subscribing is free to you. Thanks for watching.